Okay, people have been asking for it for a little while now, and while I will admit that this video isn't nearly as bad as the video I will have to make in the future of every single Sharingan ability, it is still going to be a relatively Herculean task. So here it is, with no further ado, every single Rinnegan ability. If I can cover every ability that the Rinnegan has, then you might have the ability to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell, because if you like the idea of me explaining a bunch of anime fandom nerddom stuff, then you're gonna love this page. Also, I got a new rug. Look at Chibi Kurama and the Akatsuki cloud. Shout out to Glossy Rugs. Okay, so before we get into the abilities of the Rinnegan, let's quickly cover what a Rinnegan is. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a Keke Mora. No, it is not a Keke Genkai. It is a Keke Mora, which means instead of just 2 chakra releases, it's actually all 5 chakra releases, and yin and yang. It's hailed as the greatest of the 3 dojutsu, that being Rinnegan, Sharingan, Byakugan, and the first person to ever have it was Hagoromo Otsutsuki, who awoke it simultaneously with his Mangekyo Sharingan when he fatally wounded, well, not fatally wounded, but heavily wounded Hamura, his brother. So how do you get one of these bad boys? There's literally only one way, and unfortunately that one way is Hagoromo Otsutsuki. More or less, you have to get Hagoromo Otsutsuki's DNA inside of you. Well, not necessarily his DNA, but his chakra. And this can be done 2 ways that we've seen. Essentially, you can either get the chakra of both of his sons, Indra and Ashura, or he can gift you his chakra directly. The first circumstance is how Madara awakens his Rinnegan. Black Zetsu, trying to get a Rinnegan to awaken in one of Indra and Ashura's reincarnates over hundreds of years, finally gets to Madara and says, implant Hashirama's cells, who was an Ashura reincarnate, into your body, because Madara was an Indra reincarnate. Because of this, after decades and decades of times of waiting, at the end of Madara's life, he awoke Rinnegan. The latter way is the way that Sasuke awoke his Rinnegan, when Hagoromo was essentially like, take some of this and slapped it into his face, and then boom, plot armor got a bit stronger. The only difference between Madara and Sasuke's Rinnegan is that Madara awoke a straight up Rinnegan, no Tomei in it, which means that he awoke all of the Rinnegan abilities, but didn't retain his Sharingan abilities. Not that we knew what his Sharingan abilities were anyways, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Sasuke's 6 Tomei, not Rinne Sharingan, but it is a variation of a Rinne Sharingan, allowed him to retain all of his Sharingan abilities, as well as obtain every single Rinnegan ability. That is, unless he overuses the Rinnegan, in which case all of the Tomei disappear and he can no longer use his ocular jutsus. This isn't the only downside that comes with the Rinnegan though, because if you actually implant both of the Rinnegans into yourself, if you're not worthy, it will take over your body and kill you. This is why Obito, when he took Nagato's eyes, only implanted one into himself, because he knew he wasn't worthy to have both simultaneously. However, just having one Rinnegan grants you an insane amount of power, since it allows you to see and track chakra in the body and gives you access to all 5 nature releases. On top of this, the Rinnegan is actually the only eye that can fully decipher the Sage of 6 Paths stone tablet. You know, the one in the Uchiha hideout. But on top of these more basic added boosts that the Rinnegan give you, it also gives you access to the 6 paths, or as they're widely known, the 6 paths of pain. The first of these paths, and probably the most prominent, is the Devapath, which allows the user to control attractive and repulsive forces. Think almighty push, almighty pull, essentially. This ability allowed Pain to literally wipe the Leaf Village off the map with one push of his hands. And while that's very interesting, the way that the attractive force pull works is much more interesting. Using the Devapath, you can mark things and or people as gravitationally attracted to your hand, essentially making your hand so massive in terms of weight that it has its own gravitational pull based on whatever you mark. After the Devapath, we have the Oscero Path, which allows you to mechanically alter yourself for some reason. It's one of the more random abilities in Naruto. The Oscero Path of Pain uses that in order to make his hands blades and give himself a long tail and even shoot rockets out of his wrist. Which is making me realize that for as long as the Rinnegan has existed, so have rockets. You're telling me that we've been throwing kunai in rockets exist? Like, I know Nagato isn't the one who thought of it. After the absolutely baffling Oscero Path, we have the human path. The human path is actually probably one of the scarier paths, since it allows you to read the mind of whosever head you put your hand on. Or if their thoughts don't please you very much, you can take that little hand and you can pull their soul out of their body. It'll kill them. Can't say I've ever punched my own glasses off, so congrats on seeing a first. The animal path comes after the human path and is very straightforward. Essentially, it allows you to summon immortal summons. You heard me right. These summons, which are summoned from a different dimension, if killed, just simply can be summoned again, unlike any other summon in Naruto. This would explain why Nagato has so many. Those being here, let me check my list. A bird, a dog, a chameleon, a giant panda, an ox, a rhino, a crustacean, a centipede, and the demonic statue of the outer path, aka the husk of the Ten Tails. Using the animal path, though, requires no contracts or blood in order to open a seal. It doesn't even require hand seals. After the animal path, we probably have the most frequently seen Rinnegan ability we see used, the Predapath. The Predapath essentially allows the user of the Rinnegan to absorb any ninjutsu heading their way. In terms of Rinnegan abilities, this one's actually kind of rare because we've seen multiple people use it. Most specifically, Momoshiki when he absorbs ninjutsus with the Rinnegan in his palm, and the Predapath of Pain that Nagato uses. Essentially how this works is it's very similar to the way that Naruto and Kawaki can use their karma markings to absorb ninjutsu. But on top of nullifying your jutsu, it also gives the chakra that jutsu used to make to the person absorbing it. And lastly, that leaves us with the Naraka Path, which is relatively straightforward. It allows you to summon the King of Hell, not the Death Reaper or Shinigami. No, the actual King of Hell. The King of Hell has two very nifty little abilities: interrogation and restoration. The Naraka Path of Pain, or anyone with access to the Rinnegan, can pull the King of Hell out of the ground, and if you see it, it will grab your tongue out of your mouth. It will then proceed to ask you questions, and while you answer those questions, it's constantly judging you. Kinda like my mother-in-law, am I right? I desire death. And if during the course of those questions you lie whatsoever, the King of Hell will take your tongue and that'll kill you, apparently. But if you tell the truth in every single question, it'll give you your tongue back and you just get to pass out incredibly exhausted. But who wouldn't be? You just had your tongue pulled 3 feet out of your face by a purple-faced, flame-engulfed King of Hell. As for the restoration bit, the Naraka Path, or once again, any user of the Rinnegan, can put a body part or a full body into the King of Hell's mouth, and it will spit out a completely rejuvenated and fixed version. Yes, this works even if you're dead. So are you sitting here and wondering whether or not Sasuke could have done it for Neji in the War Arc? Yes. Yes, he could have. But since we're talking about the War Arc, let's talk about the Outer Path, aka the demonic statue of the Outer Path, aka the Ghetto statue. This is the reason Black Zetsu wanted someone to awaken a Rinnegan. The Ghetto statue allows the user of the Rinnegan to put black receivers into whatever they want and send chakra in it to control them. It also allows the Rinnegan user the ability to create chains that can bind and drag tailed beasts into its mouth. It is also the husk of the Ten Tails. But there's a lot of abilities that Nagato simply didn't have access to. And if we're going alphabetically, the first would be Amento Jejikari. Ameno Tenjikari. Ameno Tenjikari is essentially a space-time dojutsu ability that Sasuke has, and it's the one he uses more than literally anything else. This ability allows Sasuke to switch places with something that he has in his vision. He uses this to switch places with swords. He uses this to switch places with kunai, with other people. And this ability acts a bit like Flying Raijin does for Minato, allowing him to avoid attacks or have his attacks land in more advantageous places, like when he stabbed Momoshiki in the Rinnegan in his palm. In English, it's referred to as Heavenly Hand Power. But he doesn't have to switch just his body. He can switch the places of any 2 things that he sees, both physical objects and jutsus. And I know I just said we're going to talk about jutsus that Nagato couldn't use, but I feel like I didn't give this jutsu enough credence when we talked about the Devapath. The jutsu I'm talking about, of course, is Chibukatensai. Chibukatensai is probably one of the most chakra depletive jutsus in the history of the show. So much so that using it actually exhausted Nagato, who has one of the biggest reserves of chakra we've seen in the show, period. Chibukatensai works in an absolutely insane way, where essentially the user of the Rinnegan creates a gravity well in the form of a black hole between their hands, and they throw it into the sky. This gravity well or black hole is so massive that when it's activated, it creates its own gravitational pull and pulls everything within a small island level towards it. How insane is this jutsu? It's what's used to seal Kaguya. It's also just the moon. Hagoromo and Hamura used this against Kaguya to make her the gravity well, and that pulled a bunch of rocks off of Earth into the shape of the moon, which then floated out into space. Nagato uses it when Naruto breaks out of it with the tailed beasts, and it's also known as planetary destruction. It's absolutely insane that this jutsu ever had to be used more than once. But since we're talking about jutsus that have only been used once, that brings us to Indra's arrow, which is only ever seen in the ending of the war arc when Naruto and Sasuke are having their final Valley of the End fight. Sasuke, after absorbing all the chakra from the 9-tailed beasts, uses his complete Susanoo as a conduit in order to create an entirely huge longbow that he channels lightning chakra into in order to counteract Naruto's ultra big Rasengan or whatever it was called. That show has recreated so many different ways to just say bigger. But let's move off Sasuke for a little bit and talk about an ability that Madara introduced us to. And that ability would be called Limbo Border Jail, aka Limbo Clones. In terms of ass pulls, this jutsu was probably the biggest one. Essentially what this jutsu said is that there is a world called Limbo that exists parallel to our physical world. Everything in Limbo is the same, except we in the physical world cannot perceive it. Madara, with one Rinnegan, can cast a shadow into this Limbo realm, and these shadows can do literally everything Madara can, a lot like a shadow clone, except for the small fact that they can't be seen by human eyes. In the war arc, Sasuke is able to see them because of his new Rinnegan, and Naruto is able to sense them using his Six Paths mode, and they can only be damaged using Six Paths Senjutsu. But think about that for a second. A shadow clone in a dimension that your opponent can't see. And the worst part is, with 2 Rinnegan, Madara can make 4 of them. That means there could be 4 complete Susanos in a dimension you cannot see or perceive unless you also either have a Rinnegan or Six Paths chakra. Or those 4 clones could use Tengai Shinsei, which is another Rinnegan ability, which allows the user to pull meteorites from the upper atmosphere. This jutsu literally allows you to throw small moons at people, and guess what? If you block one, well, what are you gonna do about the second one? Because apparently you can just keep spamming this bad boy and having your moons crash into each other until eventually Gaara can't hold them anymore. Since we're talking about holding things, that brings us to our last Rinnegan ability and arguably our hardest to pronounce. So give me a second here, let me try it. Takamimusu Binokami. I'm so sorry. The Takamimusu, we're gonna call it the Momoshiki ability. The Momoshiki ability allows Momoshiki to absorb jutsus into his hand with the Rinnegan in his right hand, and with the Rinnegan in his left hand, release those abilities right back at those who had given them to him. The only problem? Those abilities come back twice as strong. It is the living embodiment of no, you. That one only took me an hour and a half to film, but I'd still say I deserved that like on this video, the subscription to the page, and for you to click that noti bell. Because if you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed yourself the whole time, you're gonna love this page. Listen, I'm not saying that Sasuke is purposely ignoring everyone who's dying around him when he has the chance to bring them back, but like, mark another mark in the column of reasons to hate Sasuke.